What's up, guys? And today we're talking about perspective. Step 1, scroll. Step 2, acquire victim. I already did this off cam because it literally took me longer to find a reference than it did to actually make this particular drawing. Here I conveniently also teach you how to use the reference window on Procreate. Start off a base by geometric shapes. It is okay to trace over the base shapes if you're still learning. I still do it sometimes if they're really difficult poses. Also, with perspective drawings, warp tool is going to be your best friend. You're going to see me using the warp tool, the distort tool, the freeform tool so often. It's insane. Main thing is, if you really want to push the perspective, you really have to push the perspective. Most dynamic ones are already pretty kooky crazy, but if you're going for a cartoonier style, then you're definitely going to want to exaggerate literally everything. It doesn't matter if the proportions are slightly off if you're doing cartoonism also. So you can just kind of make shit up as you go along. That's kind of what I do. You don't have to worry about it being perfect, or not matching the reference exactly, or not matching the one that I do exactly. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, as long as you're happy with the end result. Also, don't be afraid to, just completely faff around with it all the time, and make 10 billion changes, and warp it 10 billion times, and move everything around. Do all of that. And don't be afraid to erase stuff either. You're gonna make mistakes. Even professional artists make mistakes. I've been drawing for freaking 10 years now, and I still screw up, and I still have to faff around for 20 minutes before I even start actually getting into the drawing. That's just how shit is. I do push this pose a little bit, but not a hell of a lot. Early sketching stage is kind of boring, but I figured that I'd show at least some of it, because going from absolutely fucking nothing to something really quick is quite jarring, and I know that it helps some people to be able to at least partly follow along with the process. Main thing to remember is that everything is just shapes and lines. It's all just lines. It's all just straight lines. Nothing's really curved. It's just lines. And you don't have to worry about the sketch looking jank. As long as the base shapes are good, and you're happy with the form of everything, then you really don't need to worry about it looking a little bit goofy or a little bit chicken scratchy, because you'll just fix that up in the line art portion. I'm gonna say it again, warp tool is your absolute best friend if you're drawing perspective, because perspective is a pain in the ass. If you were doing a perspective mostly from scratch, you would also be using a grid, but since we're going off of reference, which I recommend using a reference for every piece of art that you do ever, because it will indubitably make it better every single time. But if you're going off of reference, you don't need to use a grid, really, unless you really, really, really struggle with perspective, which... valid, actually. I think most people do. But also, I know that grids make it harder for some people to understand. I know that grids make it harder for me to understand personally, which is why I don't use a grid. And if you're trying to, showcase something, it kind of gets in the way. Which is why, I didn't use a grid here. Okay, now on to tips for making the perspective look perspective-y. You're going to notice that I use much thicker lines around the things that are closer to the camera, or the viewer, or whatever you want to call it. And then much thinner lines on stuff that's farther away, because that also adds to the illusion of depth. You don't have to do this. If it isn't cohesive with your style, then obviously, you're not going to. But it's just a little trick that I learned that I personally quite like, and I think that it just makes it look really neat. Next up, my favorite thing ever, the perspective blur. I use the blurs on Procreate so much, but I've just walled off the foot that is right in your face in this perspective, and I'm using different versions of the perspective blur to blur everything else, so that since that's right in the foreground, it's the only thing that you can see clearly, and everything else is just a little bit fuzzy. And if you wanted it to focus on the not foreground, then obviously you would do the opposite. It depends on where your camera, quote-unquote, is going to be focusing. But this one, I wanted it to be focusing on the thing in the foreground. Adding a gradient to the background of any perspective drawing can also help to push the perspective a little bit, which is something that I was quite going for in this piece, and if that's something that you're going to be going for in whatever piece you have that uses an extreme perspective, then I highly recommend it. That's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope you have a great day/night, wherever it is that you are. Thanks a ton for watching, and if you could, then I'd like it if you could subscribe. Costs you nothing, and it helps me out a lot.